relationships. Can your best friend, and should your best friend potentially be the perfect mate for you or not? The answer is no, and I will tell you why. Your best friend is definitely not necessarily the one for you. Before I get started, this is comic book artist, writer, and director Graig Weich from BeyondComics.tv. I'm a certified life coach on the side, which a lot of people don't know about me. My dad was a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and I studied under him for quite some time. And I'm going to present something to you, and I'd like to see if this helps open up any kind of confusion that you might have on this topic. So, here's the situation. The reason why a lot of best friends that you get along with so perfectly end up being not good in committed relationships is because the requirements and expectations that you have from your friend are completely different than what you have from a partner in a relationship. That's the number one reason. So for example, you don't really care if your friend, your best friend, if you say goodnight to that person every night, or if you say good morning to that person every day. You don't really necessarily have what they do impact you in any massive way, in any capacity, because they're your friend. You don't hold that certain kind of special area of the person you may marry or have a family with one day. You don't even think about that toward your best friend. So someone who might be a fantastic, perfect best friend may actually really fall far below your quote-unquote requirement of what you imagine your perfect mate will be in the relationship category. That being said, a lot of people impose on someone else certain expectations, limitations, things that they don't care if their friends do, but they do care if their potential future wife or husband do, right? So that's one of the major issues and things that I think a lot of people may not have necessarily analyzed or, come to. So I know a lot of people who've actually tried, like one friend of mine who shall remain nameless, she tried to have her roommate, who she was fantastically got along with for years, become her boyfriend. And that fell apart after a year and a half. Why? Because suddenly now her imagination of what the perfect boyfriend, husband, future father of her, future children could become, fell flat, fell short. Another massive kind of thing I wanted to touch upon is the requirements. A lot of guys and girls are not particularly clear why the relationship seems to have so many wonderful ingredients, yet still is unsatisfied or doesn't work. On average, and I know this is going to be kind of a shock to a lot of people, on average, the number one requirement that a woman often feels safer and more comfortable with is if the guy is a provider. If she feels that he has a consistent ability to provide. Doesn't have to be rich, but has to show a certain level of being the provider, the consistent, responsible provider, if you will. Once that is checked off the box, everything else can kind of be worked out or fall into place. If that's not in there, it's going to be tough. So a lot of people who run into trouble like that are artists and writers and actors and, people in entertainment, musicians. They have a very inconsistent schedule. They have a very inconsistent paycheck. And I think that scares a lot of women in serious relationships with guys if that guy hasn't hit that certain consistency peak of showing a certain stability financially. So financial stability is like the number one thing, unfortunately. Even if that person is a custodian, it doesn't have to be the best job. But even if that person has just not the most millionaire type of job, it helps a woman feel more protected. And that goes way back to biology, when women are looking for the right husband to be the right provider to quote unquote, feed the kids and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of designed in us, if you will. It's a very basic kind of thing. And guys on the opposite end of the spectrum, often are attracted by, beauty and visuals and looks. I think even more so than a lot of women on average. Not always, but on average. That's why a lot of guys, you might see some what appears to be far older, less attractive men with very stunning looking women, because those guys have provided a sense of security for the woman in some capacity. And again, I'm not only talking about the obvious stuff like super rich dudes or whatever, I just mean a certain level. So, if you are a guy and you're wondering, gee, why am I having trouble in relationships and what's going on? And everything seemed to be so great and we were attracted to each other, but why isn't it working out? Or why, do certain things happen? If you happen to be dating somebody who wants to kind of build a family or have that type of life, a lot of time they want you to have that kind of basic block in place so that they know that they're going to be taken care of in the future. And a lot of people have trouble imagining someone becoming successful and getting to that level of security. So I think a lot of people break up out of fear that they won't get what they want from the other person. Now, this is also true with some very financially independent, successful women as well. Even they seem to want to be able to, be not necessarily treated, but they want to know that the man can handle and take care of certain things, certain bills, things like this. It just makes them feel more feminine and makes them feel better from the people I've spoken to. This is not for everybody, obviously. There's exceptions, of course. But a lot of people I've spoken to, like guy friends and I will speak and, they'll be like, I don't understand, I'm good to her. Why isn't that enough? Why can't she just appreciate having a good man like me? And this guy might be, for example, like a musician or, I don't want to name anybody, but, or maybe he's a writer or maybe he's an artist or maybe he's a painter or maybe he's an actor. It's one of those kind of jobs where you're not sure when your next paycheck is coming. You're not sure when your next big success is coming. And I think that fear that, his girlfriend, had is the thing that kind of made her start to pull away because she can't imagine or see it happening fast enough. You understand? I've gone through it. Other people I know have gone through it. It's a shame. It really comes down to like a basic survival type of mechanism. So that's one aspect of it as well. So, this is, again, another topic that we're bringing up. There's a lot more that I'll discuss in future videos, so please make sure to subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and definitely post your comments below. I'd like to hear your feedback and what your thoughts are. I personally think it's very important to have two people come together and communicate with one another. It's super, super important. And I know that a lot of women that I've personally dated who are absolute, visually stunning, beautiful looking girls, I have found, not with all of them, but I have found with the majority that I have particularly, dated throughout my life, it seems that they have been a little bit immature in certain ways. They think that they are incredibly, mature, but unfortunately in certain areas they're not. In certain areas they are, but in certain areas they're not. And I think a lot of the problem with that has been that a lot of men have kind of flocked to them because they're so attractive looking. So because they have always kind of gotten the majority of what they wanted and a good response from guys, it never forced them into a position to have to analyze themselves or their behavior because they're very attractive and they got a lot of guys to just run around them because, again, guys are very visual creatures. For me, I'm kind of numb to it at this point because I've always been around beautiful models and actresses and stuff like that. So I try to look for what's behind the eyes, which I have, said many times before. Because I'm kind of numb to the other factor of it, especially as someone who does what I do professionally and full-time as an artist and things like that. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic, to try and understand someone else and, why one person may analyze himself more than others. And again, this is not for everybody across the board, okay? There's a lot of, very attractive and not so attractive people who have both been, either immature or mature, who have analyzed and not analyzed. So I'm just saying the averages of what I have personally encountered, that's what seems to have happened, And I think that's been kind of an issue. Now, also, I have dated people that, I think were very beautiful inside. It made them, to me, look more beautiful outside. But I think that, a lot of my friends are like, hey, she's not that attractive. Why are you dating her or whatever? And I think they're a little bit more shallow in that way. Not all of them, but a couple of people that I'm thinking of who said that. And I understand, it's kind of like a relationship is an ingredients kind of stew, right? So a lot of times, yes, you have the attraction, and yes, you have a connection, and yes, you have chemistry, but you may not be compatible. So these two ingredients might be missing. So you have 3 out of the 5, for example. It's just like baking a recipe or a cake. If you don't put the baking soda to rise, have the cake rise and all this kind of stuff, it's going to stay flat. You need to have all those ingredients in there. And people have different things. It's very important for some people to have very common interests. It's very important for some people, to be very funny. It's very important for some people to be faithful and loyal and empathic and kind and gentle. And, and some people want super independent. And there's all different mixes, And then now moving on to something totally different topic, which is cheating, right? I've told both my male and female friends, oh man, I don't know what to do with them, because I remember when I was kind of like this when I was a teenager, I was like, I got to stay on top of my girl and make sure that everything is okay. I was very young at the time, but I think that when you grow up and you hit your 20s and your 30s and you start getting older, the truth is, and I tell this again to my friends, both male and female, if you're terrified that your partner is going to cheat on you, you have to let it go, because they either are or they're not. And there's nothing you specifically can do to change their mind or change who or how they operate. You understand? A lot of people are like, well, let me check the bag. And like some of my guy friends are driving me nuts because they're like emptying out their girls' bags. And I'm like, bro, leave the girl alone. Just let her do what she does. And if you guys are compatible and you click, awesome. If not, that's awesome also. That's okay. Then you have a friend. You know what I mean? I'm just a little bit more laid back about it, I guess. It's kind of like, if somebody does that when you're in a committed relationship, just move on to someone else. You know what I mean? It's easier said than done. But let it go quickly. Like I was married, and when that stuff didn't work out for our own set of reasons, 24 hours, boom, divorced. That was it. I filed the papers and it was ready to roll in 24 hours, and it's very painful. It's very sad. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of mourning and loss involved, but you have to pull the trigger and move on quickly so that you don't waste more time. You've hopefully learned something valuable and you move on. It's very important. And I think a lot of people will stay stuck in it. And I know like a couple of different girls who are with these guys, and and they keep telling me that the guys promise they're going to leave their wife. You've probably heard this story before. And I keep trying to tell these girls, I'm like, listen, I'm giving you my word that if he really was going to leave his wife, he would have done it in 24 hours, because that's really how long it takes to just start the paperwork, And then you file and you're done and you wait, and then in a year later they approve it and you're done. But this kind of promising to start filing, is total BS, man, So again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that. I don't know whose situation is what, but I know in these two particular situations, these guys are having a lot of fun and they have girls on the side. It's kind of a shame. It's not cool, but, I feel bad for the women who are hanging there waiting for this divorce that's never going to come. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they're still waiting, And again, some guys are in situations where they feel stuck and they don't know what to do, and they're trying to do this and they're handling it the wrong way. It's a sad kind of thing. Sometimes, the wife, I feel bad for her because the guy's just an ass. It depends, it's all good and bad mixed. There's a lot of gray. It's not black and white. It's not simple. It's not a clear direction. It's very gray. There's a lot of individual kind of situations. But I have found one important thing, and that is I will only be in a committed relationship if it helps bring at least 1% more happiness to my life. If it brings it down 1% than it was when I was single, then I won't be in that relationship. It's not worth it. And that's very, very, very important, And again, going back to communication, I think that's a very important thing. I believe that the thing that makes a perfect relationship and that what makes it really work out is if both people are willing to do anything they can within reason to try and make it work by them putting forth their best effort and not taking the other person for granted to the best of their abilities. And people have different levels and different categories of what they feel is, you know, hey, this means a certain thing, and they ascribe a certain meaning to certain actions. Like, hey, man, you know, you're looking down at your cell phone when you should be paying attention to me. You know, it depends on why. Is the person, you know, doing it because they're being disrespectful, which is sometimes the case, or is the person doing it because, let's say, there's an urgent meeting and they'll be fired from their job if they don't? It all depends on what's behind it and the compromises within reason that are made by both people. But as long as both people are willing to constantly work at it and constantly put effort forth, then they have a good chance of having it work out. But if somebody or both people or either or are putting demands on the other person that makes the other person uncomfortable, that's going to be a real problem, you know, because then you're forcing someone to be how they aren't. You know, people are a certain way, and my dad, God rest his soul, always gave the best advice as a trained psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. One of the key things as an MD that he would say is observe. Just watch the other person. And don't be their therapist. Watch the other person. And either they work with you in a compatible daily existence or they don't. And that's it. Don't try to change them, manipulate them, force them. Don't try to do too much. It's very hard to actually do that, believe it or not, because we have our own ideas in our mind and in our imagination of how we want that perfect person to be. And if they're not, it starts to crumble our fantasy that we've held on to since childhood, you know, for men or women. So it's very important to kind of just look at who the person is and say, hey, you know what? Is this a good, empathic person who will be there for me throughout life and try to make life a little bit sweeter than it was before when I was single? If the answer is yes, then stay with that person, try to work it out. If the answer is no, they're kind of, you know, busting your balls constantly, you know, one way or the other, or they're too overbearing or too controlling or all that stuff. Get out of that. There's a lot of people in the world. Give yourself the freedom to explore, and don't let fear guide you. Let intelligence guide you. And don't let your emotions or your quote-unquote heart guide you, because your emotions and your heart can't think. Can't see, it can't hear, it can't smell, taste. It has no knowledge. So your heart and your feelings, though pure and real, is kind of the same as a little child out of control who just wants what they want. Doesn't matter if it's good for them or not, you know? Your brain, your mind, that's the little message from the great beyond, trying to help you be your own parent. So if your emotions and your heart and your love is here, and your brain and your logic and your mind and your intelligence is here, let that be your parent to guide the feelings. So if you're, God forbid, in an abusive relationship or something is going wrong or whatever, you know, yes, you might really love that person. Great, love them, but don't give yourself over to them. They haven't earned it and they don't deserve it because they're hurting you, right? Man or woman. So it's very, very important to let this guide you. You know if something is right or wrong. You know, it's kind of in us to know. And be careful, because some people impose paranoid thoughts or paranoia onto another person. Then if it's you who's having that paranoia, you have to fix that. Like, you know, I've been with some women who were jealous out of their mind, you know, and they thought it's the job of the boyfriend to fix their jealousy problem. Even though I was 100% loyal, faithful, honest, didn't matter. That's the way they thought. You know, it was nothing that I was doing. I'm not a flirtatious dude flirting with women or anything like that. But they couldn't help it. And when I had a conversation with her about it, she acknowledged it and admitted it, and she said she knows she has a problem. This was a long time ago. But, you know, it's just an example of where you have to know the balance, you know? You have to know when someone is actually doing something or if you're just fearful and imagining it. So in the words of the great actor Cary Tagawa from Mortal Kombat and the Man in the High Castle, who's my business partner, I'm very honored to say, he always says, "It is no longer the fear of death, it is now the death of fear," which I think is beautiful. So on that note, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please post your comments below. Make sure to subscribe for updates, and as they say in comics, to be continued. Thanks for listening, and I hope this gave some kind of sense of peace, clarity, and helpful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.